Emily, Carson and Lauren Hayes thought their Idaho apartment was safe, but days before their lives were shattered, Emily began noticing terrifying signs that someone was watching them, and no one believed her warnings. The small town of Caldwell, Idaho, had always been the kind of place where neighbors waved across the street and everyone knew each other's names. Life was predictable, calm, and almost painfully quiet. That quiet was shattered when news spread about the murders of two young roommates, Emily Carson and Lauren Hayes. The town had never experienced anything like it, and the details that emerged left everyone unsettled. The apartment they shared had appeared ordinary from the outside, a modest unit tucked between two identical buildings, with a small lawn and a faded mailbox. Yet within those walls, a storm of fear and tension had been brewing, unnoticed by most. Emily, who had always seemed cheerful and reliable, had started acting differently in the days leading up to the murders. Friends and acquaintances recalled her posting strange messages on social media, messages that hinted at fear, unease, and the presence of someone who shouldn't be there. It wasn't paranoia. It was the kind of instinct that comes when someone senses danger before it strikes. She began rearranging her schedule, avoiding certain streets, and taking extra precautions that drew puzzled looks from those around her. Lauren, in contrast, seemed unaware of the growing threat. She trusted Emily implicitly, assuming that if her roommate felt unsafe, it was only a passing worry. The apartment remained their shared haven, a place for late-night study sessions, quiet meals, and the occasional movie binge. But beneath that ordinary surface, Emily was uncovering something deeply disturbing. She documented unusual noises, shadows moving where they shouldn't, and fleeting glimpses of a stranger lingering near their windows. Her observations became a private record of fear, one she couldn't yet share fully with anyone else. Just hours before the tragedy, Emily reached out to an old friend through a series of texts, her words fragmented, urgent, and cryptic. She hinted at someone watching them, someone dangerous who might strike at any moment. The friend didn't fully grasp the severity of the situation, dismissing it as anxiety or overthinking, but Emily knew better. The quiet town of Caldwell had no idea that the calm it relied upon was about to be shattered, and that the last warnings from one terrified roommate would go unheard until it was far too late. The sense of foreboding was subtle but growing, a shadow that seemed to cling to Emily as she moved through her days, trying desperately to protect both herself and Lauren from an invisible threat that would soon become horrifyingly real. Emily's sense of danger intensified in the days leading up to the murders, and she began looking for tangible proof of the threat she sensed. She noticed a figure lingering near the apartment complex, someone who seemed to appear at the same times each day. Dressed in a dark hoodie that obscured his face, he would remain just out of reach, watching from a distance, moving slowly so that anyone passing by might assume it was coincidence. But Emily's instincts told her it was deliberate, targeted, and terrifyingly calculated. She started recording the patterns, noting the times, directions, and movements, hoping that the evidence would convince anyone that her fears were real. She installed cameras in strategic places and began photographing suspicious vehicles parked near the building. But despite her careful documentation, most people dismissed her concerns. Neighbors saw her nervous glances and unusual routines, but few understood the depth of her anxiety. Management received complaints about strange activity, but nothing concrete came of them. Emily's journal became a lifeline, a detailed account of shadows that moved in impossible ways, of footsteps echoing in empty hallways, and of objects subtly rearranged in the apartment when no one was home. Each entry grew darker and more urgent, reflecting a mounting sense of impending danger. She even noted small signs that could have been warnings: a window left slightly open, a door creaking at night, a lingering smell in the hallway, but all were easily overlooked by someone not paying close attention. Lauren remained largely unaware, her trust in Emily blinding her to the danger. She continued her routine, assuming that Emily's heightened vigilance was unnecessary. The contrast between Emily's fear and Lauren's obliviousness only amplified the tension within the apartment. Emily tried to communicate the seriousness of the situation, but her words were often vague or fragmented, because she was still piecing together the patterns herself. As the days passed, the figure's presence grew bolder. Surveillance footage later revealed that he had been systematically observing their movements, entering and leaving the vicinity with a precise rhythm. Emily's sense of being hunted was no imagination. It was fact. She had been documenting a predator in action, a presence that knew their schedules and routines better than anyone in the apartment. Her attempts to protect both herself and Lauren were meticulous but tragically insufficient. Every entry in her journal, every photo, and every note was a desperate plea for someone to intervene, a record of the terror building toward the inevitable confrontation that would change their lives forever. The night of the murders descended like a heavy fog over the quiet apartment complex. The streets were nearly empty, and a cold wind rattled the windows, carrying with it an eerie sense of anticipation. Emily had spent the evening meticulously checking locks, reviewing the security footage she had installed, and noting the unusual silence that hung over the building. Despite all her precautions, the feeling of being watched never left her. She sensed the figure lurking nearby, aware that each step they took was being monitored. The predator's patience was evident in the footage. He moved with calculated restraint, entering the vicinity only when conditions were favorable, slipping between shadows, avoiding the few residents still awake. Inside the apartment, Emily and Lauren's evening seemed normal on the surface. There were small routines, like dishes stacked neatly in the sink and a shared playlist filling the quiet moments. But beneath the calm, Emily's fear had reached a peak. Her journal lay open on the table, filled with frantic notes and sketches of the stranger she had been observing. Every instinct screamed that something was about to happen, but the world outside did not recognize the urgency. The silence of the night amplified every sound: the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the floorboards, the distant barking of a dog, all of which Emily interpreted as signals of imminent danger. Suddenly, the figure appeared on the surveillance cameras, approaching the building with deliberate steps. It was clear he had studied Emily's patterns, waited for the right moment, and now he was moving closer. Emily's journal later revealed she had documented every possible escape route and potential defense, but her plans were constrained by the apartment's layout and the element of surprise that the intruder had perfected. Outside, neighbors remained unaware, the quiet streets masking the terror that had already entered the apartment. The attack was swift and brutal, leaving behind a scene that would shock the community for months. Investigators later reconstructed the timeline from surveillance footage and Emily's meticulous notes, realizing she had been trying to anticipate every move of the intruder. Each entry, each observation, was a desperate effort to prevent what she knew was inevitable. Yet, even with all her preparation, the danger had been one step ahead. The apartment, once a sanctuary, became a haunting scene of violence, leaving behind only Emily's warnings and Lauren's oblivious trust as evidence of the tragedy that had unfolded. The night ended with chilling finality, a stark reminder that intuition and foresight sometimes collide with forces beyond control. The careful notes Emily had kept became the key to understanding the murders, revealing a story of fear, courage, and the terrifying reality of being hunted within one's own home. The investigation into the murders of Emily Carson and Lauren Hayes revealed layers of chilling details that the town of Caldwell could hardly comprehend. Detectives combed through the apartment, examining every corner for clues, and quickly realized that Emily's fears had been far from imaginary. Her meticulous journal, full of sketches, observations, and warnings, became a critical piece of evidence. Investigators found references to a stranger who had been watching them for weeks, documenting his patterns with unsettling precision. Each page painted a picture of someone calculating every move, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The fact that Emily had tried to anticipate his actions spoke to both her fear and her courage, a desperate attempt to protect herself and Lauren. Further scrutiny of her digital footprint revealed online connections that suggested Emily had been researching similar cases in nearby towns. She had discovered patterns of intruders targeting young women living alone or with roommates, all showing signs of being watched before attacks occurred. It became clear that Emily's instincts were informed by research and real experience, a combination that made her awareness sharp but left her isolated. She had tried to warn others, but her efforts were scattered, fragmented by the sheer terror of what she was facing. Among the most disturbing discoveries was footage from a hidden camera Emily had installed in the hallway outside their apartment. The recordings revealed the intruder moving with a cold, calculated rhythm, observing Emily and Lauren without their knowledge. Every precaution Emily had taken was anticipated. The predator had studied them just as closely as she had studied him. The investigation painted a horrifying picture. Emily had been hunted, every step and routine accounted for, and yet she continued to leave traces of evidence in a silent plea for someone to intervene. As detectives dug deeper, the connections became increasingly alarming. Similar cases in surrounding areas shared identical methods, suggesting the intruder was part of a broader pattern of targeted violence. The apartment, once seen as a safe, ordinary home, now appeared as a trap carefully constructed over days of observation and planning. Emily's foresight, her careful documentation, and her relentless attention to detail ultimately provided the investigators with the evidence they needed to understand the murders. Her warnings, though tragically unheeded in time, became a key to uncovering the truth. The community grappled with a haunting realization: the danger had been visible, written in plain sight by a terrified young woman, yet it had gone unnoticed until the unthinkable occurred. Emily's journal became more than a record of fear. It became a blueprint for understanding the predator, a chilling testament to the consequences of ignoring instinct and warning signs before tragedy strikes. The aftermath of the murders left Caldwell in shock, the quiet streets now heavy with fear and suspicion. Investigators continued to piece together the sequence of events, relying heavily on Emily's journal, surveillance footage, and scattered digital traces. It became clear that the intruder was not acting impulsively. He had planned the attack meticulously, studying Emily and Lauren for weeks. Every move, every routine had been observed and exploited. The journal revealed not only Emily's fear but also her determination to leave a record, a trail of evidence that could lead authorities to the truth. Each entry showed a mind racing against time, desperately trying to anticipate the predator's next step, while simultaneously protecting her roommate from the unknown danger lurking just beyond their door. As the investigation unfolded, the authorities identified the killer, uncovering connections to other unsolved crimes in neighboring towns. Patterns emerged: similar methods, targeted victims, and repeated surveillance before attacks. The realization sent shivers through both law enforcement and the community. Emily's warnings, once dismissed as anxious overthinking, were in fact prescient. Her careful documentation became crucial in linking the murders to a broader, more sinister pattern of criminal activity. It was a grim reminder that instincts, when ignored, can carry devastating consequences. Emily and Lauren's story became a symbol of both tragedy and caution. The journal, once a private record of fear, was shared with investigators, journalists, and eventually the public, highlighting the signs that often precede violent acts. Emily's bravery in documenting everything, even when it seemed futile, ensured that the intruder's methods would not go unnoticed, potentially preventing future tragedies. Her foresight, though unable to save her and Lauren, became a blueprint for recognizing danger and taking action before it escalates. The community struggled to reconcile the ordinary nature of the town with the extraordinary horror of what had occurred. Caldwell would never feel the same. Residents became hyper-aware of shadows, footsteps, and strangers lingering just a little too long. The murders left a haunting legacy, reminding everyone that danger can sometimes hide in plain sight, and that the warnings of those who sense it should never be ignored. Emily's journal remains a testament to courage in the face of fear, a chilling record of a young woman who saw what others couldn't and tried, desperately, to protect the life she and her roommate shared. In the end, it was not just a story of loss, but also of awareness, foresight, and the sobering truth that even the smallest details can be a lifeline in the darkest moments.